After 12 heartbreaking years, my son exposed the incredible truth that changed everything forever. In a small town like Maplewood, news travels faster than a summer storm. Everyone knew Sarah and her son, Jake. The diner buzzed with the chatter of townsfolk. Car engines stopped on the road outside, and laughter floated through the air like the smell of barbecue on a warm afternoon. But no one could have predicted the moment that would change their lives forever. It began like any other afternoon until Jake, sitting at the lunch counter, unmasked a truth that echoed through the small-town hearts, shaking the very foundation of who they thought they were. For 12 years, Sarah had fought tooth and nail for every dollar, rising before dawn to juggle 2 jobs. She was weary, her body tired from the long hours spent cleaning houses and waiting tables. But every drop of sweat was worth it for Jake. She cherished their late-night ramen dinners, simple, nourishing, and filled with laughter that resonated through their modest home. Raising a son alone after losing her husband in an accident left an empty space in her heart, but love filled it up every day. As she watched Jake grow, the burden of grief and financial strain weighed heavily on them both. But those burdens didn't stop Jake from feeling the harsh blows of adolescence. His teenage years were marred by bullying. Kids made fun of his worn-out clothes and obvious differences from their privileged lives. Sarah always encouraged him to rise above it, teaching him about integrity and resilience. Yet, she held her own tight chest as she worried if she had truly prepared him for a world that often showed no mercy. One day, in that familiar diner, the unexpected happened. A casual conversation sparked memories and whispers from older patrons lurking nearby, unraveling a family secret that left Jake reeling. It felt as if the diner itself had come alive, listening intensely. A legacy, buried and forgotten, was revealed in hushed tones. As he learned about their family's ties to a wealthy legacy, he experienced a torrent of emotions: confusion, rejection, wonder. How could it be possible? Stripped of their struggles, he was left questioning everything: their lives, their identity, and the assumptions made by others. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As the annual Maplewood Spring Festival approached, excitement mixed with tension. Jake's heart raced knowing he'd have to confront the bullies. Sam, the ringleader, strolled up with a smug grin, ready to strike. The fear in Jake's stomach turned to fire as he remembered his mother's lessons about standing up for what is right. In that moment of clarity, he took a deep breath, facing not just Sam, but the whole community. As silence fell, he felt his voice break through the air, revealing the truth about their family. A mixture of anger, confusion, and unexpected unity erupted among the crowd. Sarah stood at the edge, heart pounding, pride swelling as she realized all the love, all the hard work she had poured into Jake had prepared him for this moment. Now, they stood at a crossroads, confronted with both the beauty and burden of this revelation. Would it heal their rift or deepen it? As the echoes of realization filled the air, the question lingered: what would come next for Sarah and Jake? Jake's breath came out in shaky bursts, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The initial shock of sharing their hidden legacy still hung in the air like the lingering scent of grill burgers. People around him exchanged looks, faces shifting from incredulity to curiosity. Jake could feel it before he even turned around, the murmurs and whispers wrapping around him like vines, drawing them all into a conversation he never intended to start. He caught sight of his mother, standing at the periphery of the crowd, her eyes wide and slightly glassy. Sarah's heart raced with pride, but there was a tinge of worry. She had thought they had left that past behind, buried it deep under layers of struggle and resilience. Now, here it was, rising like dough in the warmth of the spring sun. What will they think? She wondered, her mind racing ahead to tomorrow's headlines, to the gossip that would surely spread like wildfire. "Hey, Jake, what is this about your family being rich? Why didn't you say anything?" One boy called from the back. The sarcasm in his voice rang out, sharp and pointed. Sam leaned against a nearby tree, crossing his arms as he watched, amusement dancing in his eyes. Jake felt the weight of their stares, the challenge in their voices, but beneath it all, he felt a sense of power rising. "Because it doesn't change who I am," he finally shouted, and those words reverberated through the crowd. "I'm still the same Jake. I'm still the kid who eats ramen with his mom and works hard for everything we have." A few gasps echoed, and in that instant time stopped. He saw something shift in the eyes of the onlookers' curiosity morphing into understanding. But then, a voice rang out, piercing through the silence. "If you're so proud of who you are, what is the truth behind your dad's death?" It was Sam, taking a step closer, his voice dripping with malice. "How could a family like yours have fallen so low?" The crowd murmured again, and Jake felt the ground beneath him shift. Was it really fair to drag Sarah's painful history into this? He glanced back at her, her face etched with worry, and a wave of protective instinct surged through him. "Leave my mom out of it," Jake shouted, anger fueling his voice. "She did everything for me." The tension hung thick as the crowd waited, breaths held. Jake glanced at his mom, and they exchanged a fleeting look, one that spoke volumes. They had made it through together, and nothing would change that. But would their future together be tainted by this revelation? Would the weight of a newfound legacy overshadow their humble beginnings? As the festival continued around them, colorful decorations and laughter providing a stark contrast to the raw emotion unfolding, Jake knew he had to confront the truth. Could they embrace the past and still chart a path toward the future they dreamed of? With one last determined breath, Jake turned to face the crowd, primed for what lay ahead. "I may not know what this means for us yet, but I'm ready to find out." As he spoke those words, a ripple of uncertainty flowed through the group. What would they make of this moment? Would it lead to healing or simply to more chaos? In that charged atmosphere, one question loomed as the festival carried on around them. Could the truth truly set them free, or would it bind them in ways they couldn't yet imagine? The murmurs swelled, tangling through the throng like twisted vines. Jake stood at the center, his heart racing, a storm of emotions brewing within him. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering between the weight of the past and the promise of the future. He took a breath, searching for an anchor in the chaos. "What did you mean, embrace the past?" someone called out, their tone a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Jake turned to see Eli, a kid from his chemistry class, with curiosity etched on his face. He had always assumed Eli was just another face in the crowd, but now it was as if he was seeing him for the first time. "It means accepting what has happened, learning from it, and moving on. I'm not ashamed of our story," Jake replied, the conviction in his voice surprising even himself. A few heads nodded, and he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a chance for understanding, for growth amidst the scrutiny. But just as quickly, the air shifted again. "Yeah, but do you really know the whole story?" Sam interjected, his grin a thin veneer over a sneer. "What do you think your dad would say about all this?" Jake's stomach churned. Memories of his father's laughter, vivid and warm, flashed through his mind, followed by the crash of that fateful day. The details felt buried, encased in a fog that had hung over their family since. Why did bringing it up feel like a betrayal? "Stop it, Sam." Sarah's voice rang out, cutting through the tension. Jake turned to see his mother stepping forward, her determination palpable. "You don't know anything about our lives. This isn't just a game for us." Jake's heart swelled with gratitude. He had always admired her strength, but this was different. This was her battling demons for him, in front of an audience that hungered for more than just facts. They craved drama. The crowd shifted, glancing between the two as if they were caught in an intricate dance. Wide-eyed faces reflected the fear and excitement of being on the precipice of something new. But Sam wasn't done. "Really? because it looks like you're both just trying to control the narrative. Wouldn't it be easier to let it all out? What really happened? The air crackled with tension. Jake felt heat flush through him. Did Sam want a spectacle? All Jake could see was his mom's face, a mix of worry and resolve that made him want to shield her from more hurt. I base who I am, not on what people think of our past, but on what we choose to do now, Jake asserted. We might have money, but it meant nothing when we lost my dad. We fought our battles in silence, and now that we're finding our voice, you want to silence us? The crowd reacted, some nodding in solidarity, while others furrowed their brows. He could feel their eyes shifting, their interest deepening. He had pulled at a thread that was leading to more than just a recounting of old wounds. It was about healing. Then something unexpected happened. A girl from the back, who had always seemed distant, stepped forward. "You're right," she said softly. "I can't imagine what you've been through." Maybe we could listen as her words sank in. The atmosphere shifted again. Hope blinked in the chaos. Jake met his mother-esque gaze, and what he saw, there was a mix of pride and understanding. Maybe they could navigate this together, find their truth. But would the crowd allow them that space? "Are you ready to hear it?" Jake asked, voice steady, eyes meeting curious glances. The air felt electric, pregnant with possibility. What was hidden could finally come to light, but at what cost? The question hung in the air as the festival's laughter muffled, reminding Jake that some truths could bring healing, while others could sever bonds beyond repair. "I guess we'll have to find out," Jake murmured, his heart racing in anticipation. The exploration of their past was just beginning, and he could only wonder where it would lead them next. Jake felt a jolt of energy ripple through him, a mix of fear and courage. This was not just a conversation. It was a chance, a crossroads where truth might finally take the front stage. The crowd had pulled back the curtains, but now they needed more than interest, they required honesty. "Okay," he breathed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This started with my dad." But even as he spoke, that moment the day it all shattered came roaring back. He saw flashes of the white car, the blaring horn, and the glass shattering into a million pieces. Those fragments of memory crashed against him, threatening to drag him under. "Jake?" Eli's voice cut in, gentler this time. "You okay?" He nodded, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. This was his moment, and no one would take it from him. He could feel Sarah by his side, her hand gripping his like a life buoy in turbulent waters. "Dad was my hero," Jake started, words tumbling out. "He was funny. Caring, he taught me so much about life. But when we lost him, everything changed. I didn't understand how to cope, or how to be a son without a father. I spent years shoving it all down, thinking it would just go away." A murmur wove through the crowd, a soft, understanding wave. They might not know his pain, but they were beginning to see him. He could feel their curiosity shift into something deeper. I remember the way his laughter would fill the room. It felt like home. But then it all went silent. Everything fell apart. Mom and I had to grapple with those memories, like shadows that never truly left. He paused, uncertain. We thought it would be easier to not talk about it. But it wasn't. Sarah interjected, her voice strong and steady. It made us live in silence, like ghosts in our own home. We avoided the past, but it didn't disappear. We needed to share, to remember. Jake glanced at her, his heart swelling with pride. They were in this together, and together they could shatter the veil of silence that had loomed for too long. "I know the story isn't easy for everyone," Jake continued, "but it's ours. And it's okay to feel pain as part of that story. It reminds us we've lived through something incredible, even if it hurt." He drew a breath, summoning courage. "My dad taught me that way, too. He believed in standing tall in the face of life's storms." The crowd seemed to breathe as one, tension easing into compassion. Jake could see people fighting their own battles reflected in their expressions. There was a yearning to connect, to heal together. Then Sam piped up again, breaking the moment. "But what are you saying? That we're all supposed to just forget our fear and embrace the truth?" A collective sigh moved through the audience, but Jake could see others shifting, embers of inspiration lighting their eyes. "Yes, Jake replied, his voice ringing with newfound resolve. That's exactly it. We aren't asking anyone to forget. We're saying it's time to talk about it, to unearth it and make sense of our pain instead of hiding from it. Jake lifted his chin, scanning the faces before him. Each one was a question waiting to be answered, a soul capable of understanding. Look, he said, tone softer. I can't promise that sharing will fix everything, but it's a start, and I think my dad would have wanted that. A family shouldn't just survive. We should thrive. In that moment, a ripple of understanding flickered, igniting whispers of support around him. Eli smiled, and even Sam seemed caught off guard by the depth of Jake's words. With pride swelling in his chest, Jake felt a shift as if the very air around them had begun to change. Would they finally find common ground in shared stories of loss and resilience? Before he could reflect too deeply, Sarah squeezed his hand tighter, a silent signal of support. How many of you are ready to embrace this journey? She asked, looking around. As nods filled the air like the soft rustle of leaves, a voice piped up from the back. What happens next, Jake? With every confession sported like a lifeline, a new journey began. It was a daring forward move. Jake had crossed a threshold, but he could feel another beckoning. What happens next is the real adventure, he said softly, contemplating the path ahead. Alone, they had struggled. Together, they might ignite something that would highlight their hardships in brilliant light. And as he spoke those words, he wondered, would the truths they uncovered bring them closer together, or would they expose chasms too deep to bridge? The answer lingered just out of reach. Jake felt the weight of their gazes, each one heavy with expectation. He sought a way to capture the essence of their journey, a path toward healing lit by shared truths. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. It pulsed through him, igniting a fire he didn't know he had. Next, he said, pausing as if the very act of speaking would unravel him, we share our stories. Each of us has faced something. Fear, loss, heartbreak, it's time to reveal it. Together, we can carry each other's burdens. He glanced around, his eyes meeting a few hesitant faces, but mostly he found nods and encouraging murmurs. Sarah's hands squeezed him again, anchoring him. If you're scared, it's okay. We can support you through it. There was a woman with tears glistening in her eyes, seated in the front row. I lost my brother last year, she said, her voice trembling. I never talked about it. Not once. Jake felt a rush of empathy. You're not alone, he replied gently. We've all been there. Start where you're comfortable. The woman took a deep breath. He was my best friend, I can still hear his laugh. But it hurts too much to remember. I thought if I didn't talk about him, the pain would go away. She wiped her tears, trying to gain control. But it hasn't. Talking about him can keep his memory alive, Jake encouraged. You don't have to bear this weight alone anymore. The crowd leaned in, sensing the moment's significance. Slowly, more voices began to rise. A man in his 50s recounted his struggle with being estranged from his son after his wife's passing. A young girl, shy but brave, revealed how guilt gnawed at her after losing her grandmother, feeling like she hadn't appreciated her life enough until it was too late. It was a connected tapestry of grief, threaded through with fragmented laughter and moments of vulnerability. Each shared snippet of trauma brought them closer, layering their hearts into something powerful. It was more than sharing. It was an act of resilience. Jake caught Eli's eye in the crowd, a shared understanding passing between them. Every story brought more breath to the room, breaking down walls and dismantling chains of silence that had endured for years. Then Sam, his earlier skepticism replaced by curiosity, spoke up again. But how do we move on? How do we make peace with all this pain? There was a weighty silence, filled with reflection. It was a question that echoed in everyone's heart. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting, Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying strength. It means remembering, honoring those we've lost, and using our pain to fuel our growth. We transform sorrow into strength. Jake nodded, feeling the conviction behind her words. It's okay to stand in the pain, but we can't let it imprison us. We can grow together. It's about finding the beauty in the struggle. With each revelation, Jake felt a lightness, a release from burdens he hadn't known he still carried. The pain they each held began to find its place not as a weight, but as a part of their stories, a piece of their tapestry. As the stories flowed, Jake's heart swelled with hope. This group of strangers was no longer isolated. They were a community, each person stepping closer toward healing. And amidst the healing, a new question floated in the air, one more tangible than the last. What will our next step be? Jake asked, voice steady as a heartbeat. The crowd responded with eager eyes, hope lighting their faces, whispering promises of what they could accomplish together. Before he could elaborate, a young man in the back raised his hand, uncertainty etched on his features. Are we really ready to face all that is coming? It was the perfect question that reminded them all of the fear that lurked just beneath the surface. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the stakes rise. Would they double down on the journey ahead, or would they claw back to safety? With the weight of potential hanging in the air, he realized that as they stood on the brink of the unknown, the biggest challenge yet was about to begin. What would happen when they dared to step off that precipice? As the crowd waited, courage and uncertainty danced in their hearts, and Jake knew their next gathering would be a storm of discovery. Jake felt the room pulse with an electric energy as the question hung there, heavy like an unspoken truth seeking to be revealed. He sensed the nervous anticipation and the undercurrent of fear, but this was part of the fight, part of the freedom they all craved. Ready or not, he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice, we don't just step forward. We leap together. His words pierced the tension, igniting smiles and nods among the crowd. He watched as lingering doubts faded, replaced by the flickers of shared courage. A woman in the front row lifted her chin, gathering her resolve. I've been hiding for so long, maybe it's time to stop running, she said, her voice steady yet soft. Exactly, Jake replied, feeling her affirmation like a warm embrace. And running hasn't gotten us anywhere, right? Each step we take together, that's progress. Eager to tap into the momentum, a younger man from the side stood up, visibly trembling. If we leap, can we also fall? His voice shook, but something brave shone in his eyes. What if we can't handle what comes next? A murmur ran through the crowd, echoing the young man's sentiment. Fear lingered close. Jake stepped forward, determined to break through their defenses. What if we can handle it? What if falling isn't the end, but just part of the journey? Look around. We're all here together. This is a net, not a void. Sarah's hand was still clasped in his, and he could feel her warmth and strength. She nodded, inspiring the group to feel the same sense of safety. Yes, we're all going to fall, but guess what? We're all here to catch each other. It's not just about standing together. It's about holding each other up when we can't stand alone, she said passionately. The crowd began to stir with newfound energy. Jake could see hesitation melting under the weight of commitment. Eli stood next, slowly raising his hand. I have so much fear. The last time I opened up, I lost everything. Do I even deserve to be part of this? Everyone leaned in, silence blanketing the room as Jake absorbed Eli's anguish. You don't lose anything in this space, Eli, he said carefully. What we're building isn't about the past. It's about the present and the possibility of rebuilding. It's about being vulnerable together. It needs the glue of trust. You deserve this, every single one of us does. Hope began to shimmer as the faces around him softened. People began to nod in agreement, murmurs of affirmation rising into the air until they formed a chorus of voices, each recounting their thoughts on vulnerability and bravery. One by one, they shared stories of their own ghosts, shuffled through fears in the light of community. A wave of solidarity washed over them, bringing with it strength and the realization that hiding was no longer an option. Then, let us take the leap, Jake urged, his heart pounding. Let us commit to our next meeting where we dive deeper. We can explore what this togetherness really means. To be raw, uncovering our truths, and realizing the weight we all bear can lighten when shared. Breathless anticipation filled the area. Jake scanned the crowd for connections, newly forged bonds sparking excitement. The powerful realization hit him. This was more than a gathering. This was a revolution of healing. But just as momentum peaked, a voice came from the back. But what if I can't do it? What if I'm too far gone? The question sliced through the optimism, leaving a silence thick enough to grasp. Jake swallowed hard. The inherent fragility of their commitment loomed. Would they embrace the challenge or shrink back into their shells? As the faces around him shifted from hope to uncertainty, he realized the path ahead was not just about shared stories. It was about confronting the doubt that lingered at the edges of their courage. Would they muster the strength to face their fears? Would they push past the threshold into the unknown? Jake felt the weight of uncertainty settle like a shroud over the room. Everyone's eyes fixated on him, searching for assurance, guidance, anything to keep the thread of hope alive. He took a deep breath, steadying himself as his heart raced. "I get it," he said, his voice more reflective now, softer. "Doubt is a monster. It creeps in and tells you all the worst things." The crowd remained silent, his words hanging in the air, penetrating their fears. But here is the thing. We all have that voice. I have it. The difference now is that we don't face it alone. Murmurs rippled through the crowd again, a mixture of fear and a flicker of hope. He glanced towards Sarah, who squeezed his hand, encouraging him to keep going. It inspired Jake to dig deeper, to be honest with them and with himself. "I've felt lost before. I've faced moments that seemed impossible. But every time it was reaching out, asking for help that made a difference." A woman from the third row broke the silence. "But what if it's too heavy? What if all the hurt, the past is too much for anyone to bear?" Her voice trembled, the vulnerability raw and real. Others echoed the sentiment with nods and soft whispers. Jake felt his chest tighten. He understood their fears all too well. Together, we can share that weight. Together, we can lighten the load. Hiding from it hasn't worked for any of us. So what is the alternative? Living without this connection? He gestured around the room, the collective breath of hope building again. What if that S where true healing begins? Eli's voice broke through the tension. But what if I reach out and it doesn't change anything? What if I still feel broken? His pain hung in the air, palpable and hard to confront. The atmosphere shifted again as everyone held their breath, sharing in his fear. "It's not about changing everything overnight," Jake replied, feeling the gravity of Eli's question. "It's about taking small steps. It's about progress, not perfection. Can you see that? Every little moment we share here, it builds us up. Vulnerability doesn't mean exposing yourself entirely. At once it means taking off just one layer at a time." Sarah leaned closer, her eyes shining with conviction. "And when it feels overwhelming, remember you have us to lean on. Every person here is a lifeline." Hope sparked as a few people began to sit up straighter. Grudgingly, fear started to withdraw, replaced by glimmers of courage. A teen with bright red hair raised an arm, her voice breaking but strong. "I want to try. I want to see if it can be different. Even if it's scary, yes." Jake shouted, barely able to contain his elation. "That's exactly it. Just trying is a leap forward. It means choosing to believe in something better, in this community, in each other." A wave of murmurs surged through the crowd again. The crack in their armor began to widen, light pouring in, illuminating the possibility that they might emerge stronger. They could see that falling could lead to rising again. As Jake looked around, the faces before him glimmered with mixed emotions. Fear, hope, determination, a desire to pursue wellness together. The air shifted, charged with purpose, intent on transformation. But then, a heavy silence settled once more. A man stood, his brow furrowed, voice firm. "And what happens when we try and still feel lost?" What if his unfinished question hung heavy in the air, resonating deeply? Jake's heart raced. The challenge had been laid out, and a dawning realization washed over him. This was the very essence of their leap, not just navigating fears, but also embracing failure as part of the journey? Would they dare to continue moving forward, even in the face of uncertainty? Would they find the strength to confront what lay ahead? In that moment, the path was illuminated, yet shrouded in mystery, and each soul in the room faced the crux of a decision that would shape their lives forever. Would they take the next step, or would they retreat into what was known? Jake felt the tension in the air, the weight of the unspoken question pressing down on him. He scanned the room, looking into each face, hoping to find the right words that could bridge the gap between fear and hope. "What if we feel lost after trying?" he echoed softly, letting the question set in like a stone in a pond. He took a moment, gathering his thoughts. What if that happens? What if you take that step toward connection and it feels like just as much of struggle? His gaze landed on Eli, whose face hinted at both vulnerability and a flicker of determination. "I think it's okay to feel that way. Trying doesn't mean you'll have all the answers immediately. It means you've made a choice to show up, to continue looking for those answers." A woman from the back stood up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "But will it ever get easier? Sometimes it feels like the weight will crush us before we can even take a breath." Her honesty struck a chord, and Jake felt the ache in her words reverberate through the crowd. "It might not always get easier," Jake admitted, his voice steady yet gentle. "But every layer we peel back, every story shared, that essay moment when the weight becomes lighter. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, it's tough, and it often feels like 2 steps forward and 3 back. But each step counts. Each shared moment is a thread that binds us." Jake could see their expressions shift again. Hope mingled with uncertainty, but there was a lightness there too, a collective sigh of relief that it was okay to feel lost, as long as they were willing to reach out. Sarah stood up, her presence commanding yet warm. "We can help each other through this. None of us has to carry it all." "Jake S. right. We're all in this together." The red-haired teen echoed Sarah S. sentiment. "I want to bring my chaos into the light. I don't want to hide," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "I want to be part of something bigger." Someone else joined in. "Then let us not just talk. Let us do something. We can create this safe space together where we can feel lost but still be found by one another." The crowd seemed to reawaken, the energy buoying them. A chorus of voices began to combine a beautiful tapestry woven from fear, hope, and a desire for connection. Every time you speak up, it counts. Every time you decide to show up, it changes things. Jake shouted, feeling the atmosphere shift again. His heart raced, pulse quickening with the mounting energy. They were finding their footing, beginning to trespass into territories unknown. Jake turned to Eli, who looked like he might finally be digesting the possibility that it was okay to let go, to reach out. Imagine that feeling lost could lead to unimaginable discoveries within ourselves. That maybe, just maybe, it will feel different together. With every word, they pulled each other closer to a shared understanding. But as excitement hovered in the air, Jake noticed the apprehension still lingering in certain eyes. The truth was still unspoken, and there were barriers yet to breach. "What's beyond the trying?" Eli's voice rang out, a spark of urgency mixed with curiosity. "What is waiting for us on the other side?" The question hung pregnant in the air, a daring invitation to explore what lay beyond pain and doubt. Jake's heart thundered. They were on the verge of something profound, a truth that could either heal or break them further. Hope flickered, illuminating the space between them as they stood poised on the precipice of transformation, waiting to take the plunge into the unknown. Would they summon the courage to leap together? The room fell silent, the anticipation thick as every gaze turned towards Eli. Jake sensed the weight of expectation hanging in the air. The moment felt monumental, as if they were all part of a larger narrative unfolding. The flickering lights above seemed to pulse in rhythm with the butterflies fluttering in his stomach. Eli took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting nervously at his sides. What if what's on the other side is worse? What if we're just deluding ourselves into thinking that taking a leap is worth it when all we might find is more pain? His voice cracked, reflecting the doubts that churned inside him. Jake felt a pang of sympathy, but also recognition. Those fears were universal. He stepped closer to Eli, lowering his voice to a compassionate whisper. You're not alone in feeling that way. But remember, sometimes we need to break through that fear to find the light that's waiting for us. It's tough, yes, but it can also lead to healing. Just then, a man in the crowd spoke out. But how do we know we'll ever get there? We've all faced our struggles. What if we try and nothing changes? His words echoed Jake's earlier fears, yet this was the heartbeat of what they needed to confront. What if nothing changes? Jake repeated, sensing the stir of frustration. Exactly. What if we continue to hide? Maybe going through that uncertainty is exactly the path we need to take. It's not about having all the answers now. It's about asking the right questions and supporting each other along the way. He could feel the energy shifting again. Faces once clouded with uncertainty were now questioning, investigating the boundaries of their fears. There was something magical in this vulnerability. When everyone's defenses fell away, it allowed true connection to spring forth. I don't want to stand still forever, Eli chimed in, an edge of resolve sharpening his voice. I want to know that if I leap, there is something waiting for me, not just a wall to hit. I want to find out what's on the other side. What if it's happiness? What if it's freedom? The room reacted, a wave of murmurs rippling through as hope mingled with doubt. Jake nodded, honoring that revelation. Yes, that's the spirit. Freedom is exactly what we're searching for. It requires stepping outside comfort zones and embracing the unknown together. What if we created a space where we can face those fears side by side? The response was electric, chatter igniting as a mix of enthusiasm and reluctant acceptance swept through the crowd. It was humbling to witness, each voice adding to the collective will to confront what lay ahead. Sarah stepped back into the spotlight, her confidence now unwavering. Together, we can make change. We can share our stories and our burdens. We will find our light as we stumble and rise. But just as they began to build momentum, a silence fell again. As a teenager, someone they all knew yet rarely acknowledged stood up. His eyes were wild with emotion. What if we find out that connection isn't just something we crave, but something we absolutely need? What if our happiness is intertwined with others, and acknowledging that makes us stronger? Jake felt a shiver of truth in those words, piercing the heart of the matter. It was an absolute reminder. Connection was their lifeline, the bridge to understanding, and that light could only grow brighter when shared. They were standing at the dawn of something greater than any individual frame of fear. As they moved forward into the unknown, a shared energy pulsed through the room, an undeniable current of possibility. Jake locked eyes with Eli, feeling the spark of courage growing between them, mingling with fear, but ultimately stepping a little further into the light. Are we ready to step off that ledge? Jake asked, challenge and invitation mingling in his tone. He could feel the collective heartbeat of hope pulsing around him. What was waiting on the other side? 1,000 possibilities loomed ahead, each infused with potential transformation. Jake couldn't shake the exhilaration that coursed through him. Let us find out together, Eli declared, taking a tentative step forward, igniting a wave of agreement. The universe seemed to resonate with their decision, but as they began to gather their courage, a voice from the back interrupted the momentum again. What if some truths are far darker than we ever imagined? A newcomer had entered, a question that threatened to unravel everything. The room fell silent once more, caught in the tension of their revelations. As the air thickened with anticipation, Jake wondered what truths lay ahead. Would they be ready for whatever was waiting for them? Jake stood there, heart pounding, feeling the weight of the newcomer's question. The air felt thick with uncertainty and apprehension. What if the darkness was too intense? What if all this courage they summoned wasn't enough? But he knew they needed to face it. What if they are? He replied, steadying his voice. What if the truths we've been hiding carry the weight of our fears? But don't you see? We're not walking into the darkness alone. We're walking in as a community, hand in hand. A ripple of murmured agreement spread through the crowd. Faces once filled with skepticism now bore the marks of understanding. They were afraid, yes, but more than that, they felt the flicker of hope igniting deep within. Facing the darkness is tough, but it's part of the light we're searching for. Sometimes we have to go a little deeper to see the most brilliant colors. Jake continued, his heart bolstered by their shared energy. We can't hide anymore, not from ourselves or each other. We're here to share, to support, to uplift. The crowd shifted, whispers growing louder. Voices began to share snippets of truth, fragments of stories, weaving together a tapestry of vulnerability. Each tale scattered across the room was like a thread connecting them all, once solitary, now beautifully intertwined. Eli stepped forward again, strength lighting up his features. "Let us dig deeper," then he urged, emboldened by the connection. "We want tea, let the darkness scare us back into hiding. What will we gain from turning away?" The discussion blossomed. Others joined in, voices rising and falling like the waves of an ocean, crashing with both fear and resilience. They shared their stories, some tied together by grief, some by experience, all by a yearning to uncover truths that had long hidden in shadows. Each tale brought them closer, peeling back layers of isolation and revealing shared humanity. Jake felt tears prick at his eyes. This wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a transformation. The hurt, the fear, the confusion began to transform into understanding, compassion, and even joy. They weren't just facing their fears. They were giving voice to silenced pain and discovering strength they never knew existed. As the stories unfolded, Sarah stood by her son, pride radiating from her as she watched Jake lead the charge. "We're not perfect people. We're imperfect and beautiful," she added with a swell of emotion in her voice. "Let us embrace every bit of that. We'll hold each other as hands when it gets hard, and we'll lift each other when we stumble." The energy in the room shifted again, now a palpable warmth, fueled by acceptance and commitment. They weren't just talking about healing. They were living it right in that moment. In the quiet that followed, a new voice broke the silence. A young girl stepped forward, trembling yet fierce. "I don't know if I'm ready to tell my story yet, but I'm ready to listen," she said softly. I think we sometimes forget that listening is just as powerful as speaking. A wave of understanding rippled through the group. Suddenly, they were standing on a foundation built not only on their shared stories, but on their mutual commitment to listening, to learning. Each person became essential. They weren't just narrators of pain, but also bearers of understanding. Eli nodded, affirmation shining in his eyes. This is where it starts. Listening gives voice to fears and allows us to understand the depths of each other. We can hold space for one another. A soft wave of connection coursed through the crowd, an electric jolt that lifted hearts and spirits. They stood together, the very embodiment of a community. Hope burgeoned brightly, and in the center of it all stood Jake and Eli, anchoring a movement that would no longer be defined by their fears. "Let us commit to this, telling our stories, listening to one another," Jake declared, fueled by every voice that had joined him. "Let us promise to be here for each other." Nods and murmurs of agreement danced through the crowd. "Yes, we can do this," someone called out, enthusiasm bubbling. Out of the darkness, they had found light. As the spring festival continued around them, Jake took a moment to absorb the moment. Laughter rang out, bright colors painted the sky. But here, within this small group, a bond had formed that was stronger than any laughter or brightly painted banners. Together, they had chosen to embrace the truth, a journey rooted in love, the greatest force of all. And when the festival ended, they would carry these connections forward, finding strength amidst life's greatest challenges. Together, as a community, they could and would face whatever came next. As Jake looked around, he saw not just faces, but futures filled with hope. He realized that the journey had just begun. And no, what an adventure it would be. Together. Now, this is where I need to ask something important from you. You need to subscribe to the channel now. Don't wait for another amazing story to pass you by. Leave a like immediately to feed the algorithm and keep this momentum going. Comment below with your reactions, your feelings about this ending, and share your own stories. We want to hear from you. And finally, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. This is the moment to show your support and uplift others just like you. Don't wait, not even one more second to share.